Good morning, Zachariah Jackson, BASA News. Well, we're here in 1 Acre Park in Roselle, is that right? BASA News. Today, I'm interviewing about the power or the let me in of the black cry of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and I'm sure before that, integration cry. I'm interviewing Shahid Abdullah,
Yes.
who wrote the book Uncovering the Scam, Uncovering the Scheme, Preventing the Evolution of the African American. Okay. This is the book that you read. How long ago did you write this book?
This is my latest book. I just finished this book this year. End of last year.
Okay. Okay.
So that was, I had four books. This is the fourth of the four books I've written. And it brought me to the point of finding out what were some of the answers to some of the problems we're dealing with today, but it took me back in history.
Okay. Okay.
So that's what I had was some research.
All right. So in this book here, Saeed, you touch on integration. Well, I was born 1963.
Right.
And I was born at the heart of what we call integration.
Yeah.
The heart of President Johnson's speech that we shall overcome. And to look back, and from all my recollection of integration, it came off as a good thing. That we knocked at the door in 1909 with the development or the beginning of the NAACP. We knocked at that door. Let us in, let us in, let us in. And years later, under President Johnson, I thought that we got in. That it was a door that we knocked. That I believe that somehow we needed to get in. Let me say this. I have a friend that his father owned a bar. And one time he said to me, a black friend, black American, he said he was kind of condemning the bar.
Right.
I guess because of alcoholics and the things that come up. But knowing my old father, that was born in 1918,
Right.
and knowing that he needed that bar, that it offered a level of socialization and things that where else could they go at that time? You know, and I said to my friend, I said, well, it wasn't all bad because they needed that.
Right.
Because you're looking at a group of men, because we bear more of the burden than the women.
Okay.
That looking at a time where men were striked with being half man, too dark to come in,
Right.
too dumb to run, or whatever, you know, all the little things that were said, negative things that were said, that we needed that place. And when my father went blind at 1973, 74, my mother, who I've never seen in a bar, used to tell me sometime, take him over to the bar so he can be with his friends. And I would take him to the Howard Bar on Springfield Avenue in Newark.
Right.
And I watched the socialization and how they would call his name and everything. He felt like somebody. He felt whatever. Now, I didn't care that, you know, whatever. You know, I thought, you know, in my mind, like, this is what Dad needed.
Right.
Now, I never needed that. I've never had a drink in my life.
Right.
You understand? Okay. But he needed that because that was his buddies.
Right.
In America, because we were shortchanged after emancipation, not given the right hands of fellowship, which we still haven't gotten. I think that we needed the right hand of fellowship more than we needed the March on Washington. We need the right hand of fellowship more than we need the Million Man March, the 1 and 2 march. We never got the right hand of fellowship.
Right.
I thought that integration offered that right hand of fellowship.
Right.
But like anything, when you're invited to a party that you might not have been invited before, that maybe you overreacted.
Yes.
Okay. I want you to come on, and tell us your vision or your version of what you thought integration done for us.
Well, thank you so very much for having me say a few words about my books and publications. And I have looked at that concept of integration quite at some time. But you know, while I was listening to you talk, I was thinking about a old saying that we used to say that if you get a bad cut,
Okay.
and you just put a Band-Aid on it, it's still going to bleed, and you still may die from that cut.
Yes.
Because the Band-Aid wasn't enough. It needed stitches.
Sure.
So I think I sort of look at integration like that.
Okay.
Integration was a Band-Aid put on a situation that needed some real operation, needed real attention paid to.
Okay.
It was serious. It was very serious times. And what it did for me as a researcher, it caused me to do more research.
Okay.
And that's when I went into finding out what's going on, why people respond the way they respond today. You see, I came at a time when through the civil rights movement, I came at a time my parents, we were just coming out of segregation. So I was just feeling some of the impact of what segregation had. So I had some feeling toward that. And I was part of the Black and Proud movement.
Sure.
I was part of that. As a young man, my family was part of that. But what I consider an opportunity to, after I finished school, college, I went to college, and I was on a sports scholarship and so forth. And I noticed something because I was in Winston-Salem. I noticed something in Winston-Salem which really caught my attention. We're talking back in 1963 now.
Okay.
1962, 63.
Yeah, I was born in 63.
Yeah, see, so we're talking back a while.
60 years ago.
Right. See, so I know I'm from Roselle, New Jersey, so we don't really have what you call segregation by law at that time. It wasn't segregation, but we knew it was a difference. This side of town was the European American, this side of town African American. We knew that kind of thing went on. But in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where it was segregation by the letter, I noticed that when I went in town to go to the motion pictures, they had African Americans on one side. And I tried a trick one day. I went up to get a ticket to go in, and I spoke with an accent. I didn't just speak like an African American. I spoke as though I was from Africa.
Okay.
And then they gave me a ticket to sit on the other side.
Oh, okay.
See, so that sort of heightened my thinking to say, well, okay, there's something else going on in this American environment that they're not telling us about. I'm the same person, but yet if I spoke with an accent, they thought I was from Africa, I can go in where the European American go. Same
Because
thing.
you sound at that, well, if you would probably speak, if you spoke in English, you would speak in the English, what they call the Queen language, or the King language.
Right. And so they were, but what really caught my attention is that not only was I looking for knowledge, all these other people out here don't have knowledge either. Even the people who are executing the kind of segregation and the kind of relationship between the races, they didn't really have knowledge.
Sure.
So I had to do some research.
Okay.
And that brought me to my books. And I was blessed to come into, as I was saying, come into the Nation of Islam in 1961.
Okay.
At a time, 1968.
Oh, you came
1968.
Okay.
1968. At a time when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was still over the Nation of Islam, and I got the feel of the do for self concept, of the black and proud thinking, those kind of things. I got that flavor. And then after he passed, the Imam Muhammad Muhammad came in the leadership, and he brought us into another aspect of the do for self concept wasn't nationalism, but it was more about understanding the basic components of religion.
Sure.
See, so I got a dose of two things. I got a dose of do for self, and then I got a dose of moral courage, what religion offers.
Sure.
So I was using that as a way to build my own consciousness. And I began to research, and I began to write and study. I began to realize that much of what we've been taught was just superficial. Much of what we've been taught wasn't really for us.
Okay.
It was for someone else.
All right.
We have been taught how to serve the European American community.
Okay.
And we wasn't taught how to serve ourselves. So I saw in the Nation of Islam at that time that knowledge that was there for do for self.
Okay.
So now I brought that to the table of writing, to the table of research. And then I looked at some of the aspects, like we say, Emancipation Proclamation. I too, like many others, thought that was the beginning of independence for the African American, but it wasn't. After I researched, I found that the African American people came to America. Some came on their own, and some was brought on ships to be servants. And I have all this in that book, the one you're looking at now, Uncovering the Scheme, that the African was brought to America. Those who were brought had to be servants. Some was in the service of what you call slaves.
Chattel slavery.
Chattel slavery. Right. And others was in more of a simpler kind of workforce, which really amounted to getting paid for what you did, and you didn't come under the same rules and regulations. And what happened during that particular time, I've come to find out, researching others and their writing, that the African and the European were classified the same during the colonial time. There wasn't a classification of slaves versus free people with different experiences in terms of the rights and regulations. They were the same. They lived in the same quarters. And there was no problem with marrying whoever you married.
I've read that part of your book too.
Right. See, that's what I found. I said, okay, now then what happened? I studied Jacqueline Barilotti and a couple other people who wrote the beginning, the creation of the white race, the birth of the white race, the white nation, that kind of thing. She was a lawyer, and she became a district attorney, and she started researching, and she found that there was no such thing as white people before colonial time. Nowhere in Europe did that term exist. And what happened is that there was a rebellion during that time by Bacon, Nathaniel Bacon. Nathaniel Bacon was a European. He rebelled against another European by the name of Berkeley in Jamestown because he felt like he wanted to get in a fair shake. So what happened is that he took over. He united the African with the Native American and the European American. He had three groups he was working with. All of them united together. They burned down Jamestown, the capital of Virginia at that time. They burned it down. They ran Berkeley out. And unfortunately for Bacon, he died that same year of dysentery. But by the time the British got into that area, the British found that that they had to do something to curb this concept of rebellion. And then people united to rebel. So what the governors did, they got together and wrote England, the British government primarily, and said, we want to institute a program of divide and conquer. And what they did, they said, we're going to name some of these people white people. They gave them a label. White people. Because we know white is just a color in reality. There's no place called white. There's no country called white. There's no place of origin. But they used that, and they said, we're going to give them special privileges. We're going to let them be able to carry weapons. They're going to be able to, they can bring people to court. They'll have protection of the law, and they can marry who they want to marry, but they don't want them to marry Africans. But they can marry,
each other.
Yeah. And then they also protect their homes. That would be their degree of freedom. So when they did this, They wrote it in the law. They call it the Virginia Code. You heard of the slave code law?
That
All
was
that's
it.
in there.
Yeah.
That's in there. And then they wrote in there, they said a non-white person, African or Negro, they called those are the two names they used in that time of dealing with the people from Africa. They call them Africans or Negro.
Mm-hmm.
Negro, which from the, as you know, the Portuguese used that word to mean dark people.
Right. Okay.
See, now you hear people in the English, when you talk about it in English, they say black,
Right.
but really it means dark people when you relate to people. But, so what happened is that they began to change things. Now the European started to feel differently about himself. He started to feel superior to Africans. And it was just a natural response to somebody coming and pat you on your shoulder and say, "You a great man."
Sure.
You're going to feel better than the guy over there who they don't think is a great man.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened during the colonial time. The shaping of the mind, the shaping of the relationship toward each other, Africans and Europeans.
Right.
That single incident, that is what goes all the way up to today. This is why you can find somebody's kneeling on someone else's throat because of the color of their skin.
Sure.
Shooting somebody down because of the color of their skin.
Sure.
Only because they think they're better.
Of course,
And they was,
yeah.
and that's the scheme. See, that's part of the scheme.
Okay.
Not that the people who made that law said this is going to be in 2023, this is going to happen. They didn't see that far ahead.
Mm-hmm.
But what they knew, they had something that was powerful. That if people who came behind them would pick up that same scheme, they can control the environment, they can control the people, using that same concept.
Okay.
And that's what I learned from that research.
So bringing it up to today,
Mhm.
because you're back in colonial times at this point,
Mhm.
but bringing it up to, let's say, 1960, 1950, 1960,
Okay.
when the civil rights movement was basically established in a great number.
Mhm.
Dr. King, Reverend Aflac, Nappy,
Mhm.
Jawari, Andrew Jackson, Jackson or Jackson?
And Andrew Young.
Andrew Young, sorry, Andrew Young. And great people like that
Mhm.
coming up. Reverend Shovelworth, people like that, Rosa Parks.
Mhm.
Then we're talking about integration.
Mhm.
That how do you feel about us finally getting the stamp of integration, of entering into society? Did it destroy us? Do you think in your mind it destroyed us, or did it help us?
Well, most of the researchers right now, and I agree with many of them, are looking at that particular form of integration was sort of detrimental to us. And the reason they say that, the same reason I say it too, because we look at the time before integration. The time before integration, the African American, after Emancipation Proclamation,
Okay.
after Emancipation Proclamation, African American was making great advances. So, but in 1896, there was a ruling by the Supreme Court that said that segregation is constitutional. So they, to stop the progress of the African American people, they introduced segregation into the.
Okay.
That's the first time segregation.
Okay,
came
that's a
into
good thing to
existence.
say that, right? Okay.
See.
Okay.
So now you got segregation.
That's
This
right.
was ruled by the European American.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, now so the African American says this. He said, okay, I can't go to your store. You know what? I'll build my own store. And what happened was the reverse to that situation that the European was trying to establish. Rather than African Americans going backwards, they went forward. See, in this book here, this book, the one I don't know if I sent you one of these.
No, you didn't send me.
This is called The Negro Market.
Okay.
This was done in 1932. In 1932, and it was done by a company, the Zeph Company, for the Negro Press.
Interest of the Negro Press.
The Negro Press. That was another African American company. They had their
Yes.
own. They had their own company, and they had their own
Printing press and
Printing press, and they had their own everything. Baseball teams, you heard of that?
Right. Negro League.
Okay. So this is what was happening.
Okay.
The African American turned toward himself.
Right.
And they begin to build, and I know you heard of Black Wall Street. Most of
Yes,
you listeners
yes,
heard
yes.
of Black. That's when Black Wall Street was built, during that particular time. Black Wall Street, and also was built the Black Metropolis in Chicago, Illinois, where the south side of Chicago they thought of as being a city within a city.
Okay.
They said it was a city within a city. That's how powerful it was.
But let me interject this right here. My family came to Elizabeth in 1927. I mean, 1923.
Okay.
My grandfather died from pneumonia in 1925, and one of my uncles fell in a vat, burned up or died. 1927, my grandmother moved the family to Newark, Prince Street, in Newark, New Jersey, 1927. So around the 30s or the 40s, the kids that was once babies are grown now. And my mother, being a baby, she traveled with her brothers, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, back down to Georgia. They come from Dawson, Georgia.
Right.
She said it was the worst ride she ever took because there was places they just couldn't stop to get service.
Right.
They couldn't wash up. They had to look for places to eat and things like that.
That's right.
When they got down to Georgia, they had to hide. My uncle had to hide his car. Couldn't ride the car around town.
Right.
You know.
That's right.
And now, that right there was before integration.
That's right.
So I traveled to Florida, let's say about 2 months ago when my brothers died in Florida years ago. And I had to stop places, of course, going down.
Right.
Every place I stopped, you know, if I had a calculating how many white people I see, I guess I would say 1, 2 black, and then everything else is white.
Right, right.
As I was driving down, you know, 295 all the way down, I said, wonder how I would have felt if I was driving in 1943 down to Florida, which is a very long ride today.
Yeah.
Just imagine what it was back in those days. And the cars are so much different. I got cruise control, air conditioning, everything now. Radio, stereo, all kinds. Satellite, telephone, iPhone, everything going my way, you know. But now, so I could see why, you know, I think that's what Joe Laurie had said when I was looking for that tape that I had from years ago when Joe Laurie said, Reverend Joe Laurie said, you know, people talk about that integration, you know, it was better before it, but when you riding up and down these highways, and I could hear the words of Joe Laurie as I'm getting approaching to Georgia, I said, you know, and it was kind of right. Now, I mean, not that people welcomed me as I stopped at their places, but they didn't lynch me either. You understand me?
It depends on what you went through.
Well, I'm just saying today. I'm talking about today.
That's what I was talking about today.
Yeah. But I mean, it was easier traveling than it was back in those days, you know.
Okay.
So that's why I guess.
Well, I mean, I see what you mean,
Yeah,
but the problem I have with that is because when we take a position, like okay, I don't have as many spots to stop at. You have 10 spots,
right? And
I got 2 spots to stop at. Now I'm gonna make a deal with you so I can stop at your spots too. That's integration. Okay, now have I benefited myself or have I benefited you? I benefited you because I'm stopping at your spots and taking my money and putting them at your spots. Now, had I continued to go down and stay at those 2 spots and encourage the African Americans who lived along that line start opening up more spots.
Okay.
Let's say they didn't open up 10 spots. Let's say they opened up 7 spots.
Right.
They didn't have to open 10. Just open up 7.
Okay.
Look how much more money the African American community would have had we stopped at 7 spots.
Okay.
But the problem, see, this wasn't what integration wasn't designed to bring us in to help us. Integration was designed to stop us. Because after this book here, in 1932, this is one quote that was made in this book by the writer of the book, talking about the African American market. He said that the African American in the situation dealing with
right here.
Yeah.
The most striking example of the Negro self-sufficiency has been seen during the present Depression, while countless observers have commented on the fact that many Negroes have lost employment with white firms during the Depression. No one has complied statistics to show how many discharged Negroes have found occupation as taxi drivers, taxi cab drivers,
Right.
small independent ice men, ice cream vendors, coal and wood dealers, owners of filling stations, which is gas stations
Right.
today, and the likes.
Right.
And the like. The CMA stores are merely the highly publicized symptoms of a movement, which unhurled has many clear.
Those are grocery stores all the way across the country.
The CMA.
Yeah.
What does CMA stand for?
It's a grocery conglomerate.
Was it the black grocery?
Yeah, grocery, all African American. All these talk about all African Americans.
So
now.
do that C stand for colored or
Oh no, I don't know. I don't know what that Steve
highly
stands for.
publicized system and
Yeah.
movement which unheard has made clear the resourcefulness of the Negro race.
Okay.
While it is true that the prosperity or the property of the Negro is inexcrutable, woven with the general business conditions of the country, it is equally clear that year in and year out, the Negro has authorized his enforced isolation to achieve the same significant self-sufficiency that nations placed in similar situations have done.
Now, look at that. They talk about nations. They compared them with a nation now.
Right.
See, now this is 1932.
Okay.
They compared the growth of the African American people with the growth of a nation.
Right.
Now this is why the Europeans started integration. Not because he was a good guy. He saw this coming. He said, if we allow the African American people to keep growing independent, we're gonna have a country within a country.
Okay. So
This was more frightening than the Civil War.
So I guess I gotta go along with your grandfather, the messenger, Uncle Elijah Muhammad, when he said that we ought to have a territory state of our own.
Well, no, not necessarily. I don't agree with that. But I mean, yeah, I
this is
I
going that
understand.
way.
This was going that way not because we chose to.
Right.
He's talking about a choice.
Yeah,
not,
right.
Not because we chose to. We was taking what was given to us.
Right, sure.
We was forced in this position.
Yeah.
But what happened? We became as self-sufficient as any nation would have at the same thing. Yeah. So now you look at yourself and say you're the European American now.
Right.
You know this is happening. What's your next step? You can't go out there and kill all the African Americans.
Right.
What you gonna do? You got to diffuse this some kind of way. The only way they can diffuse it is come up with a concept.
So in other words, your version is integration again, as we spoke on the telephone. It turned our drive.
Right.
And that's why I had asked you. I said, well, do you think that maybe with integration that we overreacted?
No, we didn't overreact.
Well, I'm saying, okay, well.
No. If you give me a sleeping pill, in other words, you put medicine in a syringe and give it to me in my arm, and I go to sleep, I'm not overreacting. You just put medicine in my arm. I'm responding to the medicine. We wasn't overreacting to integration. We were responding to integration.
But okay, so you're pulling from this is from what I'm saying, that you're pulling from the fact that because of integration, right, our drive towards self-sufficiency withered. Is that correct?
That's what I'm saying.
So now, let me ask you this right here, and me and you both are men.
Right.
Can we actually blame what we call the European American because of that integration that we lost our drive?
No, those two different things. We never lost that drive.
So where did our drive go?
We became the fastest runners in the world. We became the greatest football players in the world. We became the greatest basketball players in the world. We still got the drive.
Okay.
The drive has been just redirected another direction.
It's directed off of us.
Off of us. We're not giving to ourselves. We're giving to the Europeans.
To everybody else.
Right.
To other people. Okay, I understand.
See, so we were missing. We were just. The European had a plan. Our people have to realize that we have to go by another blueprint. We can't go by the European's blueprint because that's his blueprint.
Okay.
Then his blueprint, if his blueprint is successful, then we're going to be suffering from that in some way, form, or another. But we can't blame him for that.
All right.
See, what we have to look at is that we're just as free as he is.
Sure.
We have the same rights. Nowadays, we got the same rights he has.
Right.
We're protected by the same law, although we know they do a little shifty stuff, but we still have the ability to choose and build on what we choose.
Well, okay, all right, I see where you're going now. Okay. Well, let me ask you this right here. Are we secure enough in ourselves to actually build that kind of community that we're basically talking about?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And is it happening?
But this is proof. This is proof we did it.
But this was he was doing the time.
And the Nation of Islam was the second proof.
Okay, but again, this was during the time when we was not integrated.
We were segregated now.
Segregated.
Now, Nation of Islam came around, we was integrated.
But they act on a segregated.
No, they didn't act segregated. They act on a process of doing. No, independence is a good word.
Yes.
They're acting in the part of doing something for self.
Right.
That's not
right.
say. We assume that to do something for self means we're doing something bad.
No.
We have to get away from the Europeans' knowledge on how to teach us things. We have to think for ourselves.
Okay.
Because we go do something. If I love me, I hate him. That's not true.
That's not true. No.
That's not true.
No.
We love ourselves. That's
Right.
every living creature on the planet Earth does that first.
Yes.
They love themselves first.
My mother always says a poor frog that don't praise their own pond.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. You see, your mother had a lot of knowledge. I'm telling you, she come from another generation.
Yeah.
They come from another generation, and that generation had this with them. They had this. They understood this.
They understood that.
They understood
Well,
that.
I think they understood that. I think that she was glad for integration
Yeah.
because of the barriers that stood up, like but. I do believe that she still had the independent mind because you still have to do for yourself.
Absolutely.
You talked a lot about Guess Who Coming to Dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And you remember the black actress that played in Guess Who Coming to Dinner? The black woman.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how she was so combative with Sidney Porter.
Right.
But do you remember the other woman, the other black woman?
The maid. Think you about the maid?
It was the black woman was the house.
His mother.
No, not
one
his
mother.
mother.
You're not talking about his mother. Okay, you talk about the one that lived in the house with the
one living in the
European
house.
people. Okay,
Right.
yeah. Okay.
But then there was another one
Mm-hmm.
that they shot right through.
Okay.
There was another one. Do you remember her?
No, not
Okay. I try to freshen it. Remember?
Okay.
Remember when Sidney Poitier was with what was that white girl that played that part? Was that Leslie Montgomery?
Yeah.
Okay, I think.
No, not Leslie Montgomery. It was I forget her name.
Pretty white girl.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, when he was with her, they came in the house, and there was this pretty black girl that came.
Okay.
And he said, "Who is that?"
Mm-hmm.
Right. So she said, "Oh, she comes to help Tilly certain days."
Yeah.
Whatever. He said, "Well, what
Okay.
day?" She said, "Come on, you just come on, right?"
Right.
When you look at those two, since we basically sciencing with this whole movie,
Mm-hmm.
I think that because of integration, that young black girl might have turned, even though how beautiful she was. She's a very pretty black girl.
Mm-hmm.
That eventually, because of the lack of integration, that she wouldn't have had the opportunities. So she would have turned into the same head maid that ran that house, that lived in the house.
Okay.
Eventually,
Mm-hmm.
because there wasn't other avenues. There wasn't other avenues at that time. So I think that integration kind of opened that door where she would be allowed to go to college or work in different stores and different things. And so
Okay.
That's just my take.
Well, I think the only problem I find with that is that we give integration the credit that we're supposed to be giving ourselves. We didn't need integration. We would have built college. We were showed that we were building colleges and universities and all that. We had colleges, universities, schools, and when your mother probably could have told you this, that kids who were educated in the South and in the segregated schools were better educated than the kids who were educated in the North and the northern schools. Better educated. Now that still holds true today. We have more high school dropouts, more people who fail, African Americans who fail in high school and school than we did before segregation. During the time of segregation, before integration. During the time of segregation, we had more doctors,
Yeah.
We had, and you know the people, people have doctorate degrees now. In days, just last 10 years, the majority of them come from Howard University, not Cornell, not any. They come from Howard University. It's still our schools still supply the greatest source of education for our people if we take use of it. We just believe we got to go to Cornell.
Right. Well, let me ask you this right here. Okay. If we go back, open that file, go back to, let's say, the 1950s, 1960s, and a young black person going to college. Do you think that they were more educated than the North, or were they, or could have been that the fact that we needed you to win? So if I sent you to college, outside of your A's and B's that you got, I needed you to win, because going to college was a great reminder that we were not on the world stage. That each person there was like almost like if you will, an FBI agent or CIA agent, and we needed you to integrate or to get into society and show them who we are. We needed, as the college became a thing where we passed the baton and we said, hey, you got to run this thing. Okay. Because if you don't run it, no one else is. Could that be it?
Well,
drive.
Okay, drive. Let's take it to the next step.
Okay.
Let's say all of that happens, all of that integration. Yeah. We integrated and everything else, and do all that, those kinds of things, and and going back to the movie, that whole thing about Sidney Poitier and the movies. Yeah. All those movies from there for that whole 17 years was designed to aim at one individual in our society. That was the European American woman. It was to change her mind that program called the nation,
Birth of a Nation.
Birth of a Nation.
Yes.
That prejudice mind of European Americans so degree that Hollywood had to change the mind of the people through the movies.
Sure.
And they went about it doing all. And if you watch those movies, there's 10 of them I showed in there that somebody else outlined. You see how they build up to change the mind and thinking of the European American woman to accept the African American man as a husband, as a mate. And so now, what does that do? That calls the African American people, even if they come into wealth, it's going to go back to the European American. Because when he marries the European American woman, his wealth goes back to them again.
Okay.
And they have children, and then those children, if the children marry into the European, the next generation, then they're no more African Americans. They're over. Whitewash. And now you add that to drugs, the drugs that the African Americans die from. You add to just the general, we die at a higher rate than anybody else. But let's say there's no malice involved either. But those are the facts. Look, I'm not saying who did it, black or white, none of that. But the fact is, we die at a higher rate. When you look at us against the whole majority of America, we only like 12%. We only like 12%. We die at a much higher rate than they do.
Okay.
You see, so now you take that, and you take that, then you take in the fact that the rise of homosexuality in our community, which means that 2 men can't have a baby, 2 women can't have a baby.
Sure.
Now the African American, we at the highest rate in that. Those statistics show that we're still at the highest in all these numbers. So when you put all that together with integration, there's a great possibility that the African Americans in few generations can be on the path of extinction. Just like the Aztecs. How many Aztecs do we see? There were 25 million Aztecs in this country at one time. I mean, in Mexico at one time. 25 million. You may have 1.5 million now. This where we are now. This used to be called the Delaware Indian Territory, all the way from Connecticut down to Delaware. The Lenape.
Okay.
Where are they? They're extinct.
Okay.
And see, this creation we are in, there are laws regulating it. And if the people don't follow the laws that regulate the creation, they suffer from those laws.
Okay.
The law of gravitation, all those things pertain to everyone.
That's right.
And the law of sub-replacement fertility rate on everybody, on everyone. If your people are not growing fast enough to counteract the death rate, then that people will gradually become extinct. Mm-hmm. This has happened to many people before, many other cultures before, and the possibility is that it can happen with the African American people. Because you ever see the movie called The Last of the Mohicans?
I didn't see that.
Check it. Go. They're playing it for, on the web. Go look at it. It's The Last of the Mohicans. Listen to the language they're talking. There are two of them were left, and they're talking about how they became extinct. And now they're trying to protect this young girl who was the daughter of one of those European American generals, colonial American generals, and from other Indians, from other Native Americans, they're trying to protect them from. And they was fighting against the people who was like them, but at the same time they were becoming extinct. Whether they won the war or not, they become extinct, and they did. This is a real story. Mohicans don't exist anymore. Right. See, African Americans are going to have to start looking at things real. Okay, even if they say, okay, integration is good, integration is bad, is there a possibility we can become extinct? Do we measure up to the sub-replacement fertility rate? And if not, then what can we do about it? We have to look at the life in the terms of a for real situation, not just sitting down and talking with the European Americans, not just having dinner with them, not just playing on their team. We got to look at a reality. We talk about what we talk about, wealth. We talk about generational wealth. There is no generational wealth if the generation is not here.
That's right.
There is no generation
or if the mindset of the next generation isn't tuned or trained to for the things that you're talking about.
Yeah.
A lot of people talk about generational wealth.
If they're not trained to survive,
right, then it's going to be a problem.
It can become a snake.
Yes.
That's just the reality. That's the reality of the creation.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with me, you, and that kind of thing. It has to do with not even our philosophy. Philosophy has nothing to do with it. It has to do with either you fall in the category or you don't.
So let me ask you this right here, Shahid. In terms of integration, do you think that we would have been better off without it?
Absolutely. Because isn't Chinatown better off? I mean, look at Chinatown. Chinatown's an example. Chinatown is over there, and we're bigger than Chinatown. Much bigger. The African American, there's 42 million African Americans in America. The largest group in America. Second largest group, German America. They're 40 million. And everything else is just way down the line. There's no such thing, before they even think about it, ain't no such thing as Spanish America. That's a made up thing, because Spanish, there's no place called Spanish. There's a place called Spain, and everybody from Spain is Spaniards. They're not Spanish. And the language they speak is Spanish. That's linguistic. See, they trick us with different things. They give us a linguistic identity when people really are identified by place of origin.
Sure.
You see, but keeping the place of origin intact, there are more people with descent from Africa who came through the slavery situation and integration and segregation, who came through that avenue in America than any other group in America. Any other group. See, but now we have to keep in mind that's dwindling.
Okay.
That's dwindling. But now, say we stayed together. We're bigger than Chinatown.
Okay.
All over the country. We had developments in Seattle and still got them too. Seattle, Washington, and California, all over California, New Mexico. We're all over the place, big time.
But let me ask you. Let me say this right here, Shahid, to you.
We can't. One thing I like to say though, we can't be afraid of our own growth.
Yes.
We
Well,
just can't be
I
afraid
think
of it.
that. Okay. My philosophy is this here: is that a lot of people say, put a leash on this.
Okay.
Build a wall. Don't let them out.
Okay.
A lot of people say that.
Okay.
Lock them off. Chain them together.
Okay.
Run hand in hand.
Okay.
And psychologically, that feels good. But we have a thing called the mind.
Okay.
And if a person wanna run into that lake, I can put a barrier there, but if they want to get in there, they jump the barrier.
Jump the barrier. Go right in there. Right.
I believe that everything thus far from Johnson, we shall overcome speech.
Okay.
I guess that's like 64, 65.
Something like that.
1964. I believe that everything we did or doing is good. Because sometimes it's good to go into the land of unknown.
Okay.
But only to realize after a while, and guess what? I was better when I was back home.
Okay.
So, I believe that, and from what I've been taught, that integration, that my thing is, I think that, and this is just my opinion, yeah, I just think that we overreact. But I think that
Overreacted to integration?
we overreact. In other words, we put down everything that we were doing to run to some place that don't exist. In other words, there was times when we could go to any corners in our community and get a shirt made, shoe shine, a carpenter, somebody that was fixing things or whatever.
Right.
Today, because of integration, I believe that we ran away from all those jobs.
Yes. Okay.
We ran away from the rice and bean type thing.
Yeah.
Right, only to know that we got to go somebody else and buy it.
Right.
So now, how long do you think that we're going to realize after a while, guess what? I can use a hammer too.
Right.
That we're going to come on back home.
Well, I really can't answer that question as to how long, but I know it has to happen.
It's going to happen.
If it doesn't happen, we go become extinct.
Yes.
I just believe that if we don't, there's two things that has to happen. We have to preserve ourselves, and we have to prosper. Those two things go together.
Yeah.
If we're not doing for self, we can't prosper.
That's right.
And if we don't prosper, we can't survive.
That's right.
Because everything's going to be given to us, fed to us, and if we look at everything they give us, it means that they eliminate the African American. You look at all the advertisements on TV. You can almost see it in the course of a year. They start to, more African Americans on TV than before. But as you notice, they're getting lighter.
Okay.
Lighter and lighter and lighter. And some of them, wow. And we got African Americans look just like Europeans now. That's who we are. But when they're feeding that to us, we're getting used to the idea of the dark person not even being seen no more. We're getting used to that concept of the dark. Don't worry about the dark guys. They're over there. See, but that's us too. See, so eventually they get rid of part. Then they say, okay. Then they get rid of the next part. Then they get rid of the next part. Then it's all gone. You see, there's a that scheme that we talk about early on in colonial time. They started. That's what's going on right now. Because they can use that same scheme to fulfill their goals and objectives.
So all the fighting, I want to go back to 1909, the NACP, developed the NACP in the Urban League. All that fighting, and then Dr. King in the 50s, all that fighting for integration. What should they have been fighting for if they wouldn't fight for integration?
Oh, they should have been fighting. There was along with Dr. King now, there was some, if you get a chance, listen to Dr. King's last speech. The last speech he ever made. Before he got killed.
We made it right there in Birmingham.
Right. He said we need to put our money into our own banks. We need to start building our own community. Okay. That was his last talk. It wasn't going to the mountaintop. You can Google it. Google Dr. King's last speech.
The last speech was at Mason Temple.
Yeah.
You talking about that speech?
Yeah, at Mississippi, wherever he got shot.
He got shot in Memphis.
Memphis, in Tennessee. That was his last speech.
Okay.
Last speech. And he said in that speech, they won't let us to do certain things, and we still spend money on their bus companies. They won't let us do that. We take our money down to the bank. What I want everyone to do, and he also spoke about a local bread, doing the same thing about local bread. He said, I want everyone to start putting the money into our banks.
Okay.
Buying bread from our grocery store. That's what Dr. Martin Luther King was bumped off after that.
Okay, Saeed, a few years ago, I won't name the thing, but I put my income tax in one of our banks.
Okay.
And it might have been about $1,500.
Mm-hmm.
It was so difficult and dealing with our banks.
Right.
Because I'm so used to being able to take my card
Mm-hmm.
from a regular bank,
Mm-hmm.
all right, and go anywhere.
When you say regular, you mean European?
European.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, that's a European bank.
Yeah.
I call it establishment.
European American, yeah.
I call it establishment bank, you know.
Well, there's European American establishment. Yeah. But our bank.
I was able to, get my card and go anywhere.
Okay.
All right. But with this bank,
Mhm.
I had to go only their branches.
Okay.
And it was very few. And a lot of time I go to the machine wasn't working.
Okay.
And then they said I can go to a corner store.
Okay.
And in many areas that they said, and I know good and well, I wasn't gonna drive in the corner store and go in there and take the money out of the bank. I wasn't gonna do that right there.
Right.
But so what I'm saying is that sometimes, brother, like with us,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard
Mm-hmm.
to do business. You want to do business,
Mm-hmm.
but we make it very difficult. Now, in that bank, to them it was, it was just business as usual.
Right.
That didn't bother them.
Right.
So after a while, after drawing so much money out, drawing the money out,
Right.
I finally closed the account
Right.
because it was just so difficult.
Right.
And who can deal with difficult today in a highway moving society?
Right.
I can't deal with difficulty like if I was working for you, said, well, brother Zachariah is good, but it's very difficult. Send him to do something, all these problems, we have to let him go, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
To save the business for everybody else.
Right.
So how do we,
Well, there's the old saying.
go ahead.
The saying is patience persevere. We're gonna have to deal with the patience of correction. In other words, they have gotten us out of the self-sufficiency that we were into during segregation
Okay.
through integration. Now there's a path back, but we're gonna have to have patience to get back there. It's not gonna happen like overnight. We don't got used to the fast food cooking and everything. We don't got used to the easy way of doing things. That the European has fed this stuff to us. But now to get our own, we got to take another step that we're not used to taking.
What's that?
Patience. We got to be patient because all those tellers and all those bank managers are going through the same psychological deterioration or psychological breaking down of our people as we are. They're not coming from a different perspective. They're coming from the same perspective. Say, well, black people ain't got nothing. Black people lazy. They stupid. They this. They're coming from that same mind frame because that's what's fed to them, just like it's fed to us.
But,
See, so they would tell us the only thing we can do is run football or basketball, but they won't put men in front of us like this brother Richard Smith, who you didn't know to him.
Yeah.
How many of those? Now he's just one billionaire, but how many other multi-millionaires we got that they don't never put before us?
Yeah, or don't want to be announced.
They should.
Don't want to be announced.
But see why they don't want?
Richard was definitely an angel sent. He paid all them
College
things at Spelman and Morehouse.
Yeah.
And when he paid it, he stood up there and paid it. One black guy that was in the audience, his eyes, he had glasses almost like yours, but clear.
Right.
His eyes spin around in his head.
Yeah.
I mean, I have never seen nobody's eyes be like that. And he said, "Don't worry, your bill is paid." His eyes spin around.
Yeah. See, but
God bless
we
Richard
need,
Smith.
we need the young people to learn from successful African Americans and see them in their community. We got a job to do. Our salvation is not going to come by the way of the European. He's not interested in saving us. He has more to eat without us. He doesn't need us to wash his clothes. He doesn't need us to iron for him no more. He doesn't need us to run his companies. They can do all that themselves. They needed us when they was picking cotton, and they needed us when we needed a hand labor of tobacco and all that kind of stuff. They needed us. But now, as those times have gone out, they do not need us. And because they don't need us, they say, well, how can we get rid of them? Because they're here, they're just feeding off us now. If we turn, they want to trade. They want $1 every time we get $1. They say, they call us racist if we don't give them $1 if we go get some ice cream and don't give them some ice cream, they call us racist, and we the one got the ice cream. See, they see that we are more of a
So what could we do at this point of challenge?
Okay.
Where we're at today?
How can we take the long road back? You saying?
Well,
Yeah.
Okay. As I said, and I said to you over the telephone, we talked a great deal of time. Should have had that tape. But like I said, Saeed, is this here, is that I just think, in my mind, I think that we overreacted with integration.
Well, I see what you mean now. When you said that the first time, I didn't quite understand what you meant.
Okay.
And but as you talked, and when you're talking now, I understand clearer what you meant. And I have to agree with you that we, in the sense of, but I don't use the term overreacted.
Yeah.
You using the term overreacted, which it suffices.
It's over. In other words,
we went the wrong way. In other words, we took advantage. We didn't take advantage of the opportunity, and we responded to doing less work, doing less this, and doing that. We
thought that we, after integration, that we thought everything that our hands did, everything our hands produced, right, was in foul.
Right.
Was in a foul.
Right.
We did it only because we wasn't accepted.
Right.
So what we did was, we went mainly academia. So in other words, everybody gonna go to college. Everybody gonna walk with a suit and tie and this that. And so we put down our jobs that build communities.
Right.
We the guy on the corner, Joe, that worked at the gas station. I had a Joe in my community in the Central Ward. You could go to Joe, and Joe knew everything. He was like a wizard.
Right.
You know, I mean, he was a guy that if your car was broken, okay, we get it going. And he would come there and work, and next thing you know, the car going.
Right.
If you would lift weights, and Joe tell you, well, you need to eat this, you need that. And we broke down our characters because we thought that we could build beyond them.
Right.
And we thought that we were going to replace everything with the universities. Everybody go to school was going to come out and this, that, and the other, and we were going to diminish changing the tire. Right. You know, we were going to, don't shine no shoes no more. Because I can shine shoes. My father still can shine shoes. I know how to shine shoes real good. And I don't shine my shoes every day. You understand me? You know, and I put a little water in the paste, and then I wipe it around, and then I can spit shine it. This, that, now spit shine don't mean spitting on the shoe. And stuff. So that's the part of overreacting that I think that we did. And I think that, like a kid, you know, I remember I was teaching Sunday school with these kids, and I was bringing a lot of candy. So every Sunday I would bring candy. I would go to Walmart and get all this candy. Did you know in 2 years after a while, the candy was there and the kids wouldn't eat it. They became gorged out of eating candy. You understand? The candy was no longer a novelty. The novelty had worn out. And I think that right there is what's happening with us now, is that the novelty of running from each other is way out. And I think that, and I'm kind of glad that we took that, as God always have a fork in the road for you. Left or right. Left may be right for you, right may be left for you, whatever it may be. But he got that fork, he can go either way. I'm kind of glad, as a product of the 60s, born 1963, 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, I'm kind of glad that we took that route. You know why?
Why?
Now we know there's nothing over there. You understand me? Yeah. See, I would rather have a group of soldiers, 100 soldiers, that believe where we were standing is worth defending, than to have 200 soldiers that don't believe what we're standing is worth standing up for.
Absolutely. You sound like the preacher, the reverend, who preached the sermon called, I have it in the book too, if you get a chance to get download the whole thing.
Okay.
I just did it. He was a preacher who was talking to, it's an African American preacher. He was talking to African Americans primarily. And the sermon is called the capture of General Cornwallis. They were talking about the surrender of the British to the American armed forces and the Revolutionary War. And the gist of the argument that the preacher was saying, the sign he had on it was an African American. That's what he signed it as.
Okay.
And that was the first time we saw that the African American people was calling themselves African Americans.
Okay.
That was in 1782, during the Revolutionary War.
Okay.
You see, so we know that occurred. So now, but in his argument, he was saying many of you are in the soldiers, not soldiers, but you're in the ranks with the British. Because there were thousands. He's talking about thousands because they were on both sides. Just like there was on both sides, there was British and there was colonists. It was on both sides.
Right.
Like some of them was traders, like wasn't it? Not John Hancock. What was the trader?
I can't think of his name.
Yeah, everybody called
Benjamin
him.
Ar-
Go ahead.
Benjamin Arnold.
Yeah, that's it. Arnold was in it.
Arnold.
Benedict Arnold.
Benedict Arnold.
Yeah,
Benedict.
yeah. See, so that meant just like him. See, but that's the way things go.
Mm-hmm.
But now the thing is that he was talking to the Africans who was part of them, and that's how we found out this was the African American. He was saying, I want to say something about my complexion. He said, we are all descendants of Africa. Mm-hmm. See, now you know he's an African American. This is in the sermon. And he says, but I ask you, what have you gotten from the British all these years? But I asked you, he asked 3 or 4 questions about was what did you get the freedom you was looking for from the British all the years? He said, why not come to a side which is a new experiment about freedom? Wow. Talking about the colonies.
Right.
He said, why not be on that side, something you can be part of?
Okay.
See, this is what he was saying.
Wow, that's a deep speech.
Now that was the first time I saw and I
that
agreed
was a
with.
black man delivered that speech.
Oh yeah, yeah. And that was the first time I saw it and I agreed with this concept that this integration, because I don't consider the integration we're in now. I call it this integration, false integration, really. Okay. But the integration he was talking about was equality.
Right.
He said, why not join somebody you're going to be equal with,
yes,
and you'll be able to make up the government and everything with them.
Sure.
This is, and there's only one of these, one of the original, the original of this is in Harvard University's
library.
Yeah. So all you do is you can Google it and then you get it. But to get that, what I was saying, now you have to read the whole thing because that's on like page 16 when you start talking.
Okay.
It's 16 or 18 page sermon.
Okay, so he was balancing the act between the white people, basically.
Yeah, he was telling the African American. He said African. He said you're African, I'm African. We're saying why should we go with the British?
Right.
You see all these years what they did with our people.
Right.
Now he says we can have an opportunity to build a new government. We be right in the base. We're on the ground floor.
But then they still took them back to the plantation.
No, not the one. They outlawed. See, doing that, that's what we see. They outlawed slavery in most of the states at the time of the Civil War. I mean, Revolutionary War. At the time of the Revolutionary War, and at the time, those that didn't do it at that time, they did it in the state constitutions. That's why some states ended up with slavery as being abolished. That form of work is abolished. You can't hire people under that. You can't take people no more under that kind of agreement. You make a deal with somebody else that this person is in your workforce for the rest of his life. You can't do that anymore.
Okay.
That argument came up when they was writing the Declaration of Independence. You know, because Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, and he said that all men are created equal with unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the argument was, you can't have a person enslaved and preach this. You can say, I don't agree with slavery. If you're talking about this.
That's right.
So then Jefferson was born in slavery like most of the people during that time. He had slaves, his father had slaves, and so on. He married slaves and had kids by slaves, but he got involved with more equality of life in terms of people. And that's when he came up with that Declaration of Independence. And in that, one of his first complaints, because it was a declaration for independence, they had to cite complaints. Why they want to break with Great Britain? They had about 17 or so of those in there. And one of them was they didn't like the king of Great Britain, the king, who promoted the slave trade. He said this was a bastardizing the human life. Slave trade. His willingness to keep the slave trade going. That's one of the things that was in the Declaration of Independence.
Okay.
Now, what happened with that is that the ones who wanted to keep slaves in Virginia and South Carolina, because they had these big plantations,
Georgia.
they said, okay, look, we can't mention that in the Declaration of Independence. We can't mention that in what we're going to vote for. You have to take that out, and then we'll vote on what you. So he had to take that out, but still, you could go Google that again, and they say what was the passage that's taking out the Declaration of Independence at the time of the vote, and that would come up. You see, so the idea was that the time that the colonists was fighting for freedom against Great Britain, they was fighting for the freedom of everybody. Is that what I call in the book here, the predatory nature of people to want all the money. You see, that's why they want to keep slavery. They didn't care nothing about the human life. They wanted to keep their big plantations going, and that's why they fought to keep that. Even though they declared independence, and many of the Africans were declared independent at the same time, and they lived independent. They lived free. There were more Africans enslaved than they weren't enslaved, but all Africans weren't slaves, and all Africans, some of them own plantations. In fact, they own their own plantations. But that's the thing that we sometimes miss because we don't see all the information that's out there. I got that in that book, the sermon of General Cornwallis, that I was just looking through the different things, and there's another sermon that comes up by a guy named Timothy Wickett. He wrote a sermon too of the capture of General Cornwallis. He was a European American, and neither one of them, you could say both of them are very similar because they both talked about the church. They both talked about the things out of the Bible. They both talked about how they were evil people came down and righteous people became the truth and all that. They both talked about that. But only the one that signed African American talked like an African American. He said, "I am an African. I'm an African like you. We're from the same. We have the same descendant and the same complexion." He's the only one that said that. So that's what we knew. That one is the one by an African American, and he was talking to a group of African Americans. You know. See, so but it's those kinds of things which make you look at this thing different, but you still have to take the position that you was taking, and that we sort of took the wrong step when we did go into integration. We went left instead of right. You know. See, I agree with
excited.
That. Yeah, well, you got a chance to live next to white people and call them white, and we see, and that's another thing we don't realize. Every time we call a European American a white man or a white woman, or you call ourselves black for that matter, but call them white, we're calling them what they taught us what white meant. See, we're not calling them something we invented ourselves. We're calling them something they invented to tell us what white means to us. They say, now this is what white means, so whenever you say this word or think this word, that's what this means.
Yeah.
See, that's what superiority comes from. That's what racial superiority comes to that.
Well, like I say that, I enjoy being called Black American, and because I think that being called African American in some way, we're going to lose our step here in America because we did a whole lot here in America. I think that out of all the groups of people of color, the Black American has the largest library. We have stuff written about us from 1619 on up to today. You can go any bookstore and find a great many books that we've written, that's been written by authors and noted authors and those that's not. So I think that we have such a great library, such a great history here in America that I just think that I would hurt my ancestors if I didn't salute it. So I salute it from that.
Yeah, I understand that, and I understand it clearly, and I think it's honorable. But I do think we need to search more, because those people at that time didn't call themselves black people. They called themselves Negroes or Africans.
Right.
You see, so the people we're talking about, they didn't call themselves what we call this black term. See, I remember when it really started being used. That was when the Nation of Islam came out. Nation of Islam came out, and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad wrote the message to the black man. See, now and after that, what's his name? James Brown. James Brown started singing this song, "I'm Blacker Than Beautiful," and from that then became the banner for African Americans to call themselves black. But our forefathers didn't call themselves black. Our forefathers called themselves African.
What color?
No, they didn't call themselves colored even. They called themselves African. Now, color was used by the European. See, the European used that the colored people. That they used to call us colored people. I remember that when I was a boy. They used to call us colored people. I said, why we call us colored? Well, you colored people. What do you mean colored? What do you? See, that whole thing was there injecting those ideas in our mind. But the reality is when you go to their books, in our books, the way you identify a person is where they originate from. Their place of origin. Wherever their place of origin is and what their forefathers called themselves.